This is New Zealand, just south of the Pacific Ocean, about 4,000 kilometers away from Australia, the world's second most peaceful country. New Zealand's weather is exactly like the UK, mild summers, long winters and considerable rainfall, but despite this, the population of New Zealand is not even 7% of the population of the UK. If you see this map of New Zealand, you will see that almost 80% of New Zealand is completely empty and no one lives there. 70% of New Zealand's population lives here. In the north and also in the north, 50% of the population lives in this one city. Such tremendous weather, beautiful scenery, people. Despite the crime rate and high standard of living, why 80% of New Zealand is empty? Let's know the answer to this question. It's the real truth that in this video. First of all, if we look at the world map, you will notice that New Zealand far away from the rest of our world. Meaning if you board a ship from Karachi or Mumbai, then you can cross the entire Arabian Sea and Indian Ocean and reach New Zealand after about 18 to 22 hours of flight. And now the question arises that how did man reach this island so far away from the world? Now there is multiple views here. If we go to the official website of New Zealand, it is shown there that between 1320 and 1350, Maori people discovered New Zealand 1,000 years ago. All these islands of the Maori Pacific Ocean, also known as the Polynesian Islands, were called the people living on them. According to official sources, around the 13th century, Maori left all these islands and sat in big boats and reached New Zealand here. This roughly coincides with the time Mars Solar Genghis Khan was taking control of the whole of Eurasia. But now the question arises that why did these people leave their old island and come to New Zealand? When we researched to find out this question, we came to know from some articles that there is a slight difference in Maori's own historical records. According to Maori traditions, New Zealand was not discovered in the 13th century, but more than 500 years earlier, around 758, by a Māori named Kupe. Kupe was a fisherman who caught fish for himself and his tribe, but then it started happening that whenever that trap was set, its fish would be eaten by the octopuses found in that area, and these people would not get anything now. Because fish was the main food source of these people, a lot of problems started to be created, and its solution was found that Kupe and some of his companions would go to sea and try to find another island, have a good supply. In this search, Kupe landed in the Pacific Ocean with his 720 carrying 25 men. After traveling for a few days, he saw an island with big mountains. This was New Zealand, an island rich in seafood, sheep, goats and fruits, on which there was no other human being. It was the perfect place for the Kupe and for him. Kupe sent his companions back to the Polynesian Islands so that they could inform the rest of the island, and in this way the Maori people began to settle on New Zealand. The Maori people lived peacefully in New Zealand until the 17th century, and because of being away from the world, they had no enmity with anyone and no danger from anyone. But all this was about to change very soon. This was the time when Western nations were spreading all over the world to increase their power. Explorers were being sent to cover islands, countries and continents, by capturing which European countries could increase their power. In this connection, a Dutch exploratory task man went out in search of a continent in the south of the Pacific Ocean, because at that time the Europeans thought that there would definitely be a continent in this part, and if this happened, it would open up many opportunities for European countries. We'll give Tasman discovered New Zealand in 1642, but when he tried to land there, he was forced to flee after a bloody battle with his mother Maori people. Then in 1769 a British officer James Cook reached New Zealand looking for this continent. Once again, there was a fierce battle between James's soldiers and the Maori people, in which Modi was also killed somewhere. James had to go back, but this time he made a detailed map by traveling to New Zealand and all this. And through this map, Europeans started reaching this island again in the 18th century, and this time they dealt smartly with the Maori people. By giving them the greed of trade and profit, the Britishers started making their reports there, and then, after 100 years, the Britishers took complete control of New Zealand. In 1840, the British and the Maori people signed a treaty called the Off, and after this New Zealand officially became part of Europe and the British Empire. At that time the population of Maori people was about 2 lakh, but instead of increasing in the next 100 years, this population decreased from 2 lakh to 40,000, and it had 2 main regions. In fact, when the Europeans came here, those diseases also came here with them, which were common in Europe at that time. The problem was that the immunity to these diseases was not developed in the Maori people, and that is why after the European immigration the local Maori people started getting sick and dying. In the second 19th century, New Zealand had become a very violent place. Only 5 years after 20 of Whangangi, a series of land ownership wars started between the Britishers and the local Maori, which lasted for the next 40 years, continued till many locals were killed in the invoice, and finally this whole process stopped in 1881, when all the big chiefs of Maori were killed and the Maori movement was badly crushed. Now the Britishers had also understood that the local score cannot be progressed without including it in the development process, and that's why soon after these wars, the British government made the local stakeholders in every development project from the electorate process, and thus the journey of peace and progress in New Zealand finally began. But even today, as we showed you at the beginning of the video, why is so much area of New Zealand empty? And why do all the people over there live in the North Island? In fact, this southern region of New Zealand is completely empty because it is almost impossible to live or build on this entire area. The southern part of New Zealand has mountain ranges everywhere. There are high mountains everywhere in this whole area, and the land is so uneven that it is almost impossible to build even basic infrastructure like roads, etc. On this side of the mountains, the land on the eastern side is very happy and infertile, due to which even irrigation etc. cannot be done here. That's why the majority of New Zealand's population lives here on the Northern Island. To address this issue of population shortage, the New Zealand government relaxed immigration policies after World War II. Before World War II, the entry of white people was prohibited in New Zealand, and for this reason the population of New Zealand remained stagnant till 1950, and after that, when this restriction was over, Asia, especially China, people from Philippines and India started settling here, and finally the much-needed boom started coming in the population of New Zealand. Today, almost 27% of New Zealand's population are immigrants, or people who were born outside New Zealand. Majority of immigrants live here in Auckland and its surrounding areas, and this is the reason why Auckland is one of the least affordable cities in the world today, because the land supply is less and the demand for housing is high. To solve this problem, the New Zealand government is now giving people a grant of up to $8,000 so that they shift to Kato, 100 kilometers away from Auckland, so that the pressure on Auckland's housing market is reduced and the price is normal. One very interesting thing is that the entire agricultural industry of New Zealand runs on exporting animal meat. Here, due to the rains in the North Island, there is such lush green land, due to which uncountable sheep, goats and cows are found here. The population of New Zealand is around 50 lakh, while according to an estimate, the population of sheep and goats here is almost 3 million, and that is why New Zealand is the largest mutton and sheep exporting country in the world. 95% of New Zealand's meat is exported, and in 2019, New Zealand earned a revenue of $46 billion from this export. New Zealand is the 50th largest economy in the world, and the main source of revenue for this economy is agricultural sport. Earning $46 billion from just one sport of meat is an unbelievable thing, and it should be a motivation for India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, as these three are primarily agricultural countries. If you liked today's video, then please like it and subscribe to the channel. Till then, in the next video, bye bye.